I'm doing it with, not doing it with Zoom. So I had it. Oh, okay. So we're gonna have to start that again. I'm sorry.
So we're going to do Zoom?
My apologies. Yeah, no, we're gonna do this. It's just that I couldn't figure out why my mic wasn't working.
Oh,
Apparently that's why. Okay. I think my mic's working now. Woohoo! That's exciting. Well, now that I'm up to speed on the story, it's we're
well, the
good.
jacket story or the other one? Yeah, the jacket one where the guy goes up to the register with his camera out,
Yes,
and then he wants to cry foul.
he wants to cry foul. Foul.
And he got
Yes.
he got three employees fired. The story says, that he cost the job of three of the employees
Woohoo!
for
Good for
racism.
him. That seems to be the goal. How many people can you get fired? How many people can you screw up their lives? It's that's the part that really bothers me is that we have this
No,
thing
but
thing
don't you call that racism? Is it racism in a way? It's trying to set somebody up.
I would say. I think that anything where you're trying to, I don't know.
Race bait.
I think it's almost anti-human at this point. We're just getting to the point where anybody that we can bother
Set
or
up.
shut up, we will. That seems to be the way for me. But um,
And cry foul and say they tried to they sexually assaulted him because they looked at him.
yeah, that's the scary thing about the kind of world that we're living in right now is that it seems it's about anti the other person, whatever the other person is doing or saying, and being offended, constantly being offended. It's just a way of life now, as far as I can see.
Right. It's a new profession.
It's a new profession, and you can get a free cup of coffee as a result too. So, what could be better than that? I might just play this clip again. Why don't so I can familiarize people
Oh
with what we're
yeah,
talking
yeah.
about?
People didn't
Okay.
hear it.
No,
Just the 30 seconds from the 40-second mark on.
I got it at 40 seconds. I'm just going to put it up on the screen here. And we can just do it full screen so people can see what we're doing. This is just going to be short, and hopefully we won't get dinged for it, but I don't think Mark Stein will do anything.
As I understand the accusations here, one group of racists, Starbucks, has made the mistake of hiring another group of racists, the Anti-Defamation League, and they're being attacked by that by a third group of racists, the Louis Farrakhan supporters at the Women's March. All these groups are liberals. It looks like the Rainbow Coalition is actually a little more fractious than that in practice, Robert.
Well, one thing to clear up,
Okay.
that was my previous position at the Rainbow Push Coalition.
So we're not really interested in the ensuing discussion. At least I'm not.
Right.
You've heard it before.
Yeah. It just captured the this one's pointing the finger at that one. Who's pointing the finger at that one? Who's
Oh, yeah. It's unbelievable. And I guess what we thought was that the way that people were going to control one another was by force. But I couldn't have really anticipated this method. It's pretty sad because it really it pulls down all of humanity. Like there's no good guys and bad guys. It becomes everybody's at each other's throats.
Yeah, or what you're liable for, and so you don't want to hire anybody. Like who wants to hire a female employee when they can turn around and say "Me too," or whatever is the game plan, and or a person with a skin color different from your own, whatever your own is, they might turn around and bite you.
Well, this is it's very serious for people that are employers because what a lot of people don't realize is that most employers, I don't know what the actual percentage is, but I know it was up there in the 90 percentile somewhere, are small business people. I know a lot of people who are not employers think that these are big corporations like Starbucks and McDonald's and such. But the majority of people that are employing people are small business people that cannot really afford to have lawsuits, for instance. So I don't blame them for not wanting to hire people that could potentially put them in that situation. It's the loss of time even when you have a lawsuit. You have to go to work every day when you have a small business. So there's a lot of issues there. Yeah.
Well, the same with the minimum wage being jacked up to $15 an hour. The politician gets praised for it and voted in for it, but it destroys all the businesses in his district.
Right. Well, that's exactly the issue that I see here. I see the infighting and all that sort of thing. But as you said, who's going to hire these people? Who's going to hire anybody? It's not these people. It's just, generally speaking, it's always been difficult.
Yeah, that's what I was bringing up, the $15 an hour thing. That like at McDonald's, for somebody's very first job, they're not qualified. It's not like they're raising a family. I mean, if you're not qualified to do it, then for your very first starter job, well, then they end up having machines that do it instead, and you don't get to have a job because the machines are cheaper.
Right. It's not even a catch-22 because it's something that we've done of our own making. A catch-22 to me is where you lose
either way.
Right. So we could actually solve this problem if we wanted to.
$15 an hour is going to end up cutting jobs because a provider can't. It isn't like the McDonald's is cashing in on this big time. No, the prices are going to go up for hamburgers, and they're not going to be able to hire people for $15 an hour who aren't trained at all.
That's what people don't get.
It.
You're going to pay for it somehow with insurance.
So they're going to have this, right. You're going to have, cut jobs, and then have, if you want a hamburger or this, you push that button or that button. Nobody takes your order. You just push the buttons.
Right. And then we say, oh, things are so impersonal these days. It's terrible the way that we've become so, I guess, we're so dehumanized. Well, we dehumanize ourselves through these very stories. That to me is a dehumanizing story because it's treating people as though they're things. It's not saying this is a person. It's like a white, a black, a woman, a man. It takes the personal part about it, a part away from it, because we're not talking one-on-one anymore. We're talking as groups. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it's about what club you belong to.
Right.
Yeah,
so if I'm talking to you and I'm saying, well, I'm treating you as an engineer, then it's much easier for me to say, well, engineers can be, they can lie. Engineers lie sometimes. So you can sort of lump people into a whole group. Whereas if I'm talking to you as an individual, I know that you're not that person, if that makes sense. If we start,
right.
We depersonalize people by putting a label on them so that we don't have to deal with them personally, I think. I'm just maybe I've got something in my head that I'm thinking about that we just don't like to. Confront is not really the word. We don't like to deal with things honestly.
Take responsibility
one-on-one.
About honesty and like this kid who's claiming he was racially profiled for wearing a jacket out of a store that had the tags on it. That looked like it hadn't been bought yet. Mm-hmm. But why would somebody wear a jacket into a store with the tags on it that make it look like it hasn't been bought yet? And it's not in use. Wearing tags on it, and then putting himself on video camera while he's trying to check out.
Right.
It's
and then
why some people get fired.
Right, and as you said earlier, I think we weren't on the air at that point, but you were saying that they had, not that guy, but another person had a cell phone, so they were just at the ready to document the abuse that they were going to have to deal with.
Well, the jacket one, yeah, he had his cell phone out to video it as he was checking out, going through the checkout line. Was that
the jacket guy?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. I did get that then. Okay.
Yeah, and he was so videotaping it, and then when they question about, are you going to pay for that jacket? Oh, you're assuming that because I'm black that I'm stealing it. And then he has him look at the surveillance video of him coming into the store, and he wore it coming into the store. So he was setting him up.
Right.
If not, you're sure making it look like, it's the story if it quacks like a duck and walks like a duck. But what I would tell my students on the first day of class, introducing them to the course, I don't. It doesn't matter if you're cheating or not. If you look like you're cheating, that's what you get hung for, because you're creating the atmosphere that it's okay to cheat, for one thing. But the other thing is, if you're not cheating, why on earth would you want people to think you are? Why are you giving the impression you're cheating if you're not? So why make it look like that? And that's, I think, the same thing with this kid, is why on earth would you want to make it to appear that you're stealing the jacket?
Well, it's an interesting one because I am a Christian, and there's a scripture that says you need to avoid even the appearance of evil.
Yep.
Call evil what you will. But it's such a high standard. And so when I'm going into a store, I do this. With the classes and cheating on a test or whatever, you can avoid the appearance of it by just keeping your eyes on your own paper. Right. So and it says avoid.
So why would you want to give the appearance of cheating? One of the bad things about it is it creates the environment where people think it's okay to cheat. That's one of the biggest harms of the appearance of it. Doesn't matter if you're doing it or not. You're going to cause somebody else to think it's okay to cheat.
Yeah. It's such an easy thing to think about, when you go into a store, for one thing, I don't put my hand into my purse even if I'm in the store. I'm very careful about doing it where, if I have a shopping list or something, or I'm getting my cell phone out, I do it in a very open place where people know that I'm going into my purse and it's very funny because I'm conscious of it because I don't want to appear like I'm stealing anything, but it's a habit from when I was a kid.
But I think it's important not to appear. Okay, let's say that this kid comes into the store, with the tags on his jacket, so it looks like it hasn't been purchased yet, and he walks over to the checkout people, say, "See, I'm walking into the store with this." I do that if I have something to drink in my hands. See, I'm walking in with this. And they say, "That's okay." So they don't think I picked it up in the store and drank it. And anyway, if he goes over to the checkout people, and they go, "Okay, we know that," and then he goes around the store, and then it looks like he puts the jacket on and walks out the store. Even that, what does it look like to other customers? They might think, "Oh, that guy just put that jacket on and walked out of the store. I'll do that too." It's creating the environment.
Right.
Where people think it's okay. It doesn't matter if you are cheating or not, or stealing or not, but creating the appearance that it's okay to is harmful.
Well, again, when we see our politicians doing this and we see people in power doing this, it's it's very difficult to teach these things to our kids or to the next generation because there's just such corruption going on. It's hard to keep it from the children, and they can see what's going on. I just put this Inquirer cover up on because I really like it. I was standing in the checkout line, I guess a couple of months ago, and I thought it's really weird when the Inquirer actually has more authentic news headlines than the actual mainstream media. So I took a picture of this. But, when you see that, a kid standing in the line, Obama and Hillary ordered FBI to spy on Trump. And it's this whole idea that we're getting in each other's face and getting our way and having power over each other is always this fighting.
And also going back to the idea of the appearance of, well, what does that magazine make it appear? That it's okay to do that stuff so you don't get caught. Not that it's not okay. And there's a difference there.
We have somebody from the UK who's just asking about what the discussion's about. We sort of go off in various ways, but I think really what we're discussing overall is the idea of taking responsibility and the way that we are just creating an environment where we blame other people, we set other people up for, I guess, for being having a lawsuit or being. There's all the different things that we can do to put other people in their place so that we can have our rights, so-called, so that without taking any of the responsibility. I think that's, to me, what we're talking about. But what do you think we're talking about?
You're asking that person?
I'm asking you, sorry, Dr. J.
Me. Oh. Yeah. Well, the creating the appearance of something other than what it actually is, for the sake of manipulating others, is so dishonest. They should have that as a crime. But you can't have the. It isn't about obeying the letter of the law. It's about the meaning of the law, and that would be a hard thing to enforce. But it should be, people should know how to behave. The whole idea of laws is these are commonly agreed upon ways of behaving. Mm-hmm. And this is what we agree, like, let's say you live in a very small town out in the middle of nowhere, and you all agree to, leave your doors unlocked, but you agree not to go in each other's houses. That's fine. So even if somebody goes into somebody else's house uninvited, that's trespassing. Well, was the door locked? No, it isn't about the letter of the law. It's the meaning of the law. Mm-hmm. We have an understanding about it's wrong to trespass. It's wrong to steal. It's wrong to do X, Y, and Z. It isn't about whether or not you get caught. That isn't the criteria. The criteria is it's wrong to steal.
It's funny because I'm thinking about 9/11 all the time when I talk to you, of course, because we're often discussing the book, and there was somebody that mentioned, the disappearing trick of the Seven Towers was one heck of a magic trick. But I'm thinking it's also part of this same phenomenon. It's
deception, to capitalize on something that isn't what it is.
Yes.
It's to manipulate people, like the guy with the Starbucks thing as well as the jacket thing.
Yes.
The guy with the jacket was obviously setting up the store to say, see, I'm a victim. I'm being racially profiled. No, he's trying to go out of the store without paying for it, appearing to go out of the store without paying for something. Mm-hmm. He did wear it into the store. Maybe he stole it before. Maybe someone gave it to him. Whatever the deal is, okay, he came in the store with it, but he tried not to make it look too obvious. He wanted to get it on camera so he could have an out. And then he later makes it look like he puts on the jacket and then is going to kind of slither out the door with it on, and then holds the camera out. And then when they asked it, "You want to pay for that? You're going to pay for that jacket?" And try to scan it through on the checkout line, he claims that they're racially profiling him, because that is his objective. Because why does he have this camera running otherwise?
Well, that's the thing that I find interesting, is that people have their cameras at the ready now, and they're gonna take their footage and put it up on YouTube, and everyone's always the victim. And you're seeing one camera angle, and it may be absolutely true, but it's very much like doing the investigations that we've been talking about. You don't know the whole story. There's all sorts of other elements to what's happening there. And
it isn't trying to find out what happened. It's like leaving breadcrumbs to a particular conclusion.
Exactly. So in that particular situation, nobody knows about the fact that he wore that outfit into the store. Nobody knows what happened before that video was taken. But all of a sudden this... Yeah, you do notice if somebody has a jacket with new tags on it. So why are they wearing it into a store that sells those? Mm-hmm. And apparently he said he got it for Christmas, and this was in February, so it'd been 2 months. Mm-hmm. And he still had the brand new tags on it. Still looked brand new. Right. It's a setup.
Yep.
Yeah, This saddens me more than some people get frustrated because we're, doing all these, the warmongering and that sort of thing. I get more frustrated when I see our communities breaking down, because even if we didn't have war, I think these things would be going on. And I want to know what's at the heart of it, and why people as my mom would say, man's inhumanity to man, and why we have this thing inside of us where we have to get one another, or we have to see ourselves as the victim all the time as opposed to the perpetrators.
I think that this, I'm just going to guess here, I'm speculating, that this kid doesn't care about the employees. It could be he's trying to pin something on the employees, but I think it's more likely that with 800, 900,000 subscribers, just under 1 million subscribers, that his popularity comes from the videos he posts. And
right.
The others are just collateral damage. People losing their job. He's trying to just be important, but look at this cool video I made about getting racially profiled.
Yeah, that's the epitome of not caring about the other person. I really don't care what they have to deal with as long as I get my video, as long as I get what I want. Mm-hmm. Other people can pay the price. There is a story.
That's the same thing with the Starbucks coffee thing. They wanted to get somebody back for not letting them, hang out there and use the bathroom, without buying anything, just to loiter there.
Right. I'm going to put that back up on the screen for those that just came in. This is the story we were initially talking about. If you want to take a look at it on, I guess, Fox, it's Mark Stein. I have a doctor named Stain, and it's spelled the same way, and I want to call him Stain. Anyway, Mark Stein is interviewing this fellow, and they're all in a knot with each other. There's 3 different groups that are wrangling with one another because they've all been somehow harmed through this whole situation. It's insane. So if you want to take a look at it, you'll be able to find it here through the title. Yeah, there's so much to this because I've just been through so many different things this week with the idea of people not taking responsibility really gets me. You want to talk about triggered. I hate that word, but it's like when somebody turns around and says, it's not my fault, there's something deep down inside that just really irks me, and I don't know why that is.
Well, everything, it's life is not a guarantee. You could be walking across the street and trip and fall on your own feet because you're watching the birds fly overhead to make sure you didn't get hit by a bird, or maybe you looked up and a bird pooped in your eye and you tripped and fell, and you end up breaking your leg, and then you have to get correction for that. It must be somebody's fault. Mm-hmm. Instead of realizing that's just a part of life. You actually should pay for we talk about college tuition. That's tuition of life. You're paying for tuition of a learning experience, or of a life experience.
Takes a long time to pay back, I tell you.
Well, I have this philosophy of life that it's just a set of experiences. So the more experiences you have, the more life you have. So you should be grateful. It isn't the life you plan, but it's the life you have, and so you get more events. Mm-hmm. It's kind of like an amusement park ride. You get to go on several other amusement park rides. Mm. Oh wow!
Mm-hmm. Well, I think
the way of looking at it.
Yeah, and the more that you do in life, the more that you stick your neck out, the more you're going to have it cut off. So, I've had that quite often in my life where people say, wow, a lot of weird things happen to you. And I go, a lot of things happen to me, generally, for better, for worse. And the greater the volume of things that happen to you, the greater the chance it's going to be divided between good and bad. So people tend to look at the so-called bad stuff. I look at it as all experience.
Because it isn't what they wanted. I want. When you're little, you get a Christmas present, and you open it up, it isn't what you wanted. Oh, I didn't get what I wanted. Wah! Instead of appreciating that you got a gift.
Yeah. And I guess there's this other idea, and I've been guilty of it as well, where we want to share it with everybody. In this case, this guy has a camera, so then he's got to put it onto YouTube. I mean, it's the perfect way for people to gather support for their point of view. And, I'm sure there's trolls as well, but as you say, he's got 1 million people there, so he clearly has people that support what he's doing or like what he's doing. So you think that he set this whole thing up for the YouTube video? I didn't really know that until you mentioned that part of it. I just thought he was filming it to say how harmed he was when he could show it to his friends. But he's actually doing this as part of his channel, probably, I would think.
Well, yeah, if you have 900,000 what do you call it subscribers, that's not just a couple, and they come back for a reason because you have something interesting, intriguing. So he needs to put out a new show, and so but walking into a store with a jacket on that store sells, and having the price tag dangling off of it like a brand new jacket. And then walking up to the cash register with your cell phone camera out filming it.
Right. Now I have a question.
If you're pulling a fast one, well, why on earth are you making it look like you are?
Well, because now that you mentioned the YouTube thing, I get it, because this is the kind of thing people do to get 900,000 subscribers. They do all the off-the-wall stuff, and this is the encouragement to do it. We've got this audience, and it's bizarre to me that someone like him will have almost 1 million people watching him, and yet you have somebody who is actually educating or challenging people to be better. And you have a few subscribers here and there. It's always the ones that are doing things that are oppositional. I guess that would be the word that I'm thinking of. That because it's like
shocking, or
shocking.
That's part of a particular agenda. Maybe that's what we can call it.
Agenda-driven YouTube videos.
Yeah, it's agenda-driven rather than it wasn't happenstance. I mean, you can say somebody's asking for it if they walk into a store that sells a jacket they're wearing when they walk in the store, and they still have the tags on, making it look brand new, like it hasn't been bought yet.
Well, this is a really good way to contrast what is agenda-driven as opposed to what is character-driven,
if I take something back to Lowe's, I bought too many end fittings for some PVC pipes, and the first thing I do before I enter the store is to go to the service desk.
Yes.
With my bag and receipts.
Yes.
I don't walk around the store with it. No.
Right. You identify yourself. You say, I'm bringing this back. I usually give them the receipt. I'll tell you, the other day it was kind of funny because I had a friend in the car. She couldn't walk, and she wanted some clips for her hair, and I didn't know what she meant. She's Australian. She has a different word for things. Anyway, I went in 2 or 3 times, and I bought a couple of different clips, what I thought were clips. And then finally, I came back and I said to the lady at the till, I said, "Can I just leave my receipt and these clips with you while I take these out to the car to show her?" I mean, and
right.
She goes, "Oh, good, collateral." But it was so funny because I didn't have to do that, but I just thought, I need her to know what I'm doing and get permission to do that. And it doesn't mean we have to be namby-pamby all the time, but we just have to be respectful that person is responsible for the store. So we want to help them out. We don't want to make their life more difficult.
But also, it's about the store in general. Like when I get given back too much change, I say, wait a minute, I think that I got back too much change, or whatever. I'll correct them on it, or at least ask us to figure it out again if it isn't how I thought it should have come out, because it's an agreement we're entering into. Mm-hmm. I am agreeing to buy something for this amount of money, and they're agreeing to sell it to me for that amount of money. And if the change is different, then the price, the agreement, it voids the agreement. That's how I look at it.
There's so many things that I could bring up with this, and I just wanted to give one other little anecdotal thing, because close to me there was a place where people were walking their dogs and able to go through this property. Apparently I thought it was a park, and we went by one day and all the trees were cut down. So we're talking about maybe 5 acres, and it just changed the landscape completely. And I was just irate. I couldn't believe someone would do this. It turns out that the city or the town decided that they weren't allowed to cut down the trees, or they were going to come up with a bylaw where they couldn't cut down the trees. But an arborist had gone through and said that the trees were dying. And people were walking around on this guy's property, and the insurance people said that he was responsible for any trees that fall over on people. So rather than just being able to put up a no trespassing sign, or say this is private property, and then people are going, where am I going to walk my dog? So do you see what I mean? It's like this guy's private property, and he was good enough to let people go through. And I guess between the municipality and the insurance and people being pushy, he just said, fine, I'm going to cut all the trees down so you have nowhere to walk your dog, and I won't have to worry about the trees falling on you. I mean, you got to be pretty angry to do that.
And then also not letting them take it for firewood because they might hurt themselves lifting up the cut piece of wood.
It was really interesting because my friend that was in the car and I drove by and she was all aghast, and I said, she said, well, at least they should let you go in and get the firewood. And I said, why? Why should anybody be allowed to get the firewood?
It depends on whether they want to give it away or sell it or what they want to do with it.
It's their property. And I guess that was the whole thing that was at the heart of this, that people would not respect the property, and they were using it as though it was public property. And no matter what he did, and then he has all these other people on him, the municipality, the insurance people. He's just stuck no matter which way he goes. And now people are really ticked off at him because he cut all the trees down. And, I was too, until I looked into it and found out the whole story. But that was such an incredible example of this kind of lack of responsibility. He was taking responsibility. And most people thought that he was being very irresponsible by cutting all the trees down. Anyway, it was
right. Like the house I used to live in, landlord owned, and there were trees dangling over the house. They were dead, and they're going to fall any day now. Well, the landlord could pay how many thousands of dollars to have the trees taken down, or he could wait until the tree falls down, and then cash in on the insurance. That's another thing that happens very regularly, that insurance doesn't cover, what do you call it, preventative treatment. But if the tree that falls on your house, they cover that.
Well, I guess in this case, the guy was told that he couldn't even have insurance because the arborist had gone in there and said that the trees were
right.
They were unsafe. So he knew that.
But
once you know
if you did know that, you can't unknow it. But it's this game that folks. What was the reason why people burn down their houses when they can't sell them? The Detroit. The deal with Detroit. It's like a ghost town, and people couldn't even sell their houses for $50, and so they burn them down. They get more money from the insurance. It becomes a financial decision, not an ethical one, and. Of course, it's an ethical issue as to why Detroit got to that state anyway. Because apparently all the politicians were looting the piggy bank of the city and bankrupted it.
Mm-hmm. It's a very sad story there. And I know they were actually giving away houses and hoping people would fix them up so that it would help the other people in the neighborhood to retain their property values. That's how bad it got.
Yeah, and then also if somebody's hurt, the ambulance doesn't go to those neighborhoods. You just have to drive yourself to the hospital, or get a neighbor to drive you.
I had a question earlier when we were discussing the idea of the influence of incidents or events like 9/11. The fact that kids have grown up in an environment where the adults are talking about whether it was fake or real, or whether the government's lying to us, or all of this discussion that goes on. I had a revelation. I thought, that's really got to play on a kid's mind. Because when I grew up, I thought that the government was, they could do no wrong. For better, for worse.
There's different ways, right? There's different ways you can see it. Like, the reason why I say I think it was partly built into our culture for a good reason. the tradition of Santa Claus, because even your parents can lie to you. You know, it's a psyop, the Santa Claus game. And I thought that was a good thing, that was part of the culture, to teach at a young age that you know, you can be manipulated by, you know, your parents or the government or whatever. And I'm curious what the statistics are of kids who grew up without learning the Santa Claus myth versus ones who did learn the Santa Claus myth and got their world blown apart. How was their reaction to 9/11?
Mm-hmm.
And because some people just, you know, you couldn't handle it at all, and there's got to be a reason why they haven't been sort of acclimated to realize that things like that could exist. You don't want them to exist, but if it's too over the top and it's too unthinkable, it's allowed to go on because it's so horrendous. But if people realize stuff happens, it sort of puts a limit on it better.
Well, I guess there's stuff that happens, but then there's stuff that has been created by people that you're supposed to trust, like your government, like people who are in charge, and you realize that you're vulnerable in that way.
We need to hear about, this is a good neighborhood where people are, this is what we heard when we were children. People grow up to be doctors and lawyers, and could even grow up to be president of the United States. And those things now are, you don't want to be connected with them. Right. It doesn't mean you're a good person.
All of those things are nebulous at best.
Yeah, or president of the United States. It's you know, and if you're a good person, you wouldn't want to be president of the United States. So what do we get? Mm-hmm. You know, because if you're a good person, look at all the trash that gets thrown at these people.
Mm-hmm. Well,
and dig into the past, or even being, you know, associated with the president.
I hear from J.P. Broome that government is mind control. What do you think about that? I'm not going to say what I think about that. I'm going to let you.
It has become that. It has become that, but it's gone so far overboard that, like that little short clip that I had you play about this racist group is controlled by that racist group is controlled. It's like gang warfare. And now our government is no different than gang warfare. It's what group can strong arm. It's not. It quits being about right and wrong. It becomes about how to win the game, and that's what really bothers me more than anything, because it affects people's ability to solve problems and to see clearly and to think logically. Because it's all about how to win the game rather than what is true and what is false. Mm-hmm. Including the guy wearing the jacket into the store. And spinning things. So it isn't about what is or isn't. It's about how they play the game. Yes.
Now, Ben, I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing that right because he has the 2 dots over the E. But anyway, Ben says government means contract, and I don't know what language that might be in and where government is derived from. But I'd like to know more about what you're trying to... Are you asking something, Ben, about that? Or are you letting us know? Maybe you can tell me more about that.
I think... I'll make my comments that the idea of government is needed in all societies. You think of... I refer to the Haida. Lived in those islands just off the coast, Pacific Northwest, just off the coast of Canada, it's like 15 to 30,000 years, depending on which history books you look at, without mowing down any other cultures, living within their means. And of course, they have a hierarchy. They're well known for their totem poles. Mm-hmm. But there's some people who are natural leaders. It doesn't mean that they are out to exploit people. They're just good leaders. Okay, here's another example. There's a car wreck on the highway. There's a bunch of people piled up, and somebody immediately goes and runs to see if there's any survivors that need to be pulled out of the car, and then somebody else is flagging traffic down. People take on these roles that they're good at. And then there's the organizer who's making sure the ambulance has been called and whatnot. Somehow our culture has morphed into the president of the United States or head of whatever country, head of whatever government is, oh, how can I exploit the situation rather than being a leader?
Mm-hmm.
And I think it's important to have a leader, and but it should be by agreement of the governed. Like the reason why we have rules. Actually, you might find it interesting. The speed limit of 55 miles an hour in the mid 70s in the U.S. It was lowered from 70 miles an hour or 80 miles an hour or 75 down to 55 on interstate highways to save gas. We need more gas. And then that's when speeding problems really began. Because
No doubt.
up until then, the speed limit was set at what at least 85% of the population would obey. And so you get people who kind of move, systematically down the road without having somebody going 20 and somebody going 90 and, somebody going all points in between. But when they artificially lowered to 55, the road could indeed handle faster. And it'd be people who say, well, I'm going to break speed limit. Heck, while I'm at it, I might as well do it right and go 90, go 100.
I think that.
But if it's something that's close to what they think is reasonable, they're going to obey it. And I think that's kind of how community laws should be and how they work. Is what here's what we kind of want in our neighborhood. We don't want this, this, and this, but we do want this, this, and this.
Mm-hmm.
And if 90% of the people agree with that, then the 10% holdouts are going to say, okay, I'll go along with it. If you go along with this part that I'm doing. And it becomes, mutually agreed upon events. But when it gets away from that and it becomes like Robin Hood, it's no longer an organized government.
Well, this is government actually apparently means mind control. Gubernare is Latin for to control, and mente is the Latin word for mind. So there you go. We've got mind control right there. So when we're trying to mind control people, I think they tend to balk about that. And so it kind of goes to your sense that people don't want to be controlled, but they want to be part of the decision-making process.
Right,
I think that,
right.
Mm-hmm.
And
Yeah.
a good leader, you think of the chief Indian, I'm cartoonizing it. But you think of how they would be a very good leader. Well, actually, Jordan Peterson talks about this in terms of monkeys. the head monkey of the troop isn't the one who can beat up all the other ones. It's the one that is most respected by everybody else in the troop.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's how it should be. But if you have this warfare, in monkey life, they probably would split off. Okay, you take your troop over there, and we'll keep our troop here. But if you have the same land area, or somebody who's hungry and wants to just control everybody, then you have a problem.
Mm-hmm.
But I think there is a purpose for having a government. But if it runs amok, what do you do? And I think that was the whole thing with what the Constitution was about. But if they don't follow the Constitution, then what do you do?
Mm-hmm. Well, I do think that one of the things that we have an advantage of at this point is that you have somebody who's not going to go along with the typical, whatever we call government, the mind control stuff. They are able to act outside of that paradigm. And so we're actually seeing somebody...
And their problem. And that becomes a problem.
Sorry, go ahead.
That becomes a problem. And so the mind controllers have to control the minds of others and have people just, get nauseated to hear the name of that person. And do you see any difference between that and 9/11 with the truthers getting trained to? They don't have no idea what I present, but it must be wrong because Judy Woods is disinfo. Judy Woods is bad. Judy Woods is horrible. Judy Woods, they say this over and over again till pretty soon everybody believes it, and they don't know anything about what I present.
Oh, I think this is a perfect example of that, and I think that this is a great time for people to understand how that's happened with 9/11 and your book in particular, your research. That this is when you see this happening, when the person that's trying to break through and give the positive message or the real truth is being maligned, you can pretty much bet that those are the bad guys that are in the background trying to distract or, discredit.
Yeah, and they call them racist, homophobe, xenophobe, misogynist. They could.
And he
I
has
can't
small
do all the
hands.
names so fast.
Small
And
hands
they
and a long
just
tie.
run down the list as fast as they can go. So if even just one of those things in there is a turn off, then they got you hooked.
Well, this is the thing that people will say, what do you think about this Stormy Daniels thing? And they're still saying it. And I'm thinking, well, what do you think about all of the lying, conniving, traitorous behavior that's going on by the other people? Oh, and there is? I did not know.
It becomes us versus them. And what I would tend to say is, what does that have to do with, whatever the issue is?
Yeah, Syria. What does that have to do
it's
with?
kind of like, we found some specks of aluminum in the dust. Okay, what do you think that has to do? And some specks of iron oxide in the dust. So therefore, it was there. What happened to the buildings? And how does that relate to what happened to the buildings? Buildings mostly turn to dust in midair. Okay, so having dust of particles of building materials in the dust, isn't that, you'd have something wrong if you didn't have that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, but instead it turns into this, top secret thermite, patents on thermite, blah, blah, blah. But what does that have to do with what happened to the buildings?
I'm going to say that one of the questions that we have is kind of similar to that. And this is so that people know this is a course in critical thinking. This is not meant to in any way say that any question is not valid or that it shouldn't be answered.
If it's honest, if it's honest.
And part of the process is to really look at our own questions and see how they go to evidence and solving the problem. So we have a question, does Dr. Wood have commentary on the hypercube symbology at the WTC or the occultist building? And I'm going to...
I don't know this fancy lingo about, names of buildings or whatnot, but what my objective is to determine what happened. In order to solve a crime, you have to first determine what happened, and then how it happened, which usually is easy once you determine what happened. And then, who did and why. That's to solve a crime. But to solve a crime... you don't say who's, this cousin's uncle's brother was standing over here, and this one had ugly makeup on, and that one was over there doing. That doesn't solve what happened to the building. Yeah, or when somebody's cousin's uncle's brother just a dog barked, at or whatnot. It's amazing how easy it is to distract people. All of us have this weakness, and it's important to learn how to overcome it or to control it. That people want to follow the bouncing ball, and so if you're somebody who wants to cover something up, you get it by just follow the bouncing ball, and then pretty soon they're focused on something totally unrelated, and you fill your pockets with whatever and head out the door. Because it's a distraction. Isn't that how pocket pickers work? They distract the person.
Well, when I do it, that's how I work. That's my favorite trick.
Where you pick pockets?
All the time. I'm very good at it.
And also magicians, it's about getting people to solve the wrong problems. They can't solve the right problem if they're busy working on the wrong problem. And so knowing that, it's become so important to develop a discipline and looking at what happened. And just instead of what you want to have happened or what you wish had happened, so you can be right, I'm right. They're not going to get to the right answer if you keep doing it that way.
Well, you can see this happening in with this conversation too, because it could go one of two ways. And you can imagine if we were to focus on things like, we've got the hypercubes when you look from space, and you've got the Oculus building, its big closed one eye. The thing is that if we get distracted and go over to a discussion on that is a whole different thing than what we're talking about here, and something
we can
that
talk
frankly
about that, but that's not the same thing.
And something that I'm not.
Topic.
It's all speculation at that point. So if you train your mind, as I've had to learn when going through this process with Dr. Judy, it's it's really important to stay on task because she has this ability to do that as a natural gift. Most of us don't, and it takes a lot of work to just keep training your mind on what we're talking about here. In fact, you know, in the conversations that people are having in the chat, to say, oh, let's really drill down on what Dr. Judy is saying right now, because that's the important part that, you know, she's giving us, the correlation between 9/11 and people taking responsibility and the various things that we talk about that are not 9/11. You know, that's what I find so fascinating about talking to you, because you can take that same discipline and move it into a news story that may help us to understand why 9/11 is allowed to happen.
Well, it's like, you know, whoever worked in the World Trade Center, does it matter what color underwear they're wearing that day? You know, why get focused on that? You know, it becomes so easy to get the topic distracted off and derailed off into something else, and that is what keeps the people from being able to solve the problem. And if they are kept from solving the problem long enough, it doesn't get solved. It becomes, generally known as unsolvable, and people quit looking for the most part. But the truth is known, and it is knowable if you look and focus on it. Now, you can look at other things in recent past, like the JFK, shooting or whatever happened to him, and there's all sorts of distractions people get going on with that too. And if you want to know what happened, you need to focus on what happened. But like people were easily distracted with the airplane story. And you know, you're telling me that these airplanes did whatever. If you're believing in that story, and then an hour later the building suddenly turned to powder. But so therefore airplanes had to have done it. Well, just because one event happened before the other doesn't mean causation. But airplanes can't turn buildings into powder in midair. Real airplanes can't. And people want to argue whether or not there was an airplane there. Well, fake airplanes can't either. So the airplane story is a distraction. So people, well, what about the passengers? And then where are the airplanes? Pretty soon they're not solving what happened to the buildings anymore. Mm-hmm. And that's what the airplane story, I call it the getaway car. Because people get wrapped around the axle. They have to deal with the airplane thing before they can even deal with what happened to the building. And their goal supposedly is what happened to the buildings, but how does the airplane story, whichever way the story is, whether they're real or fake or whatnot, that has no impact on how the buildings turned into powder in midair.
Well, we definitely see how this affects people, even those that are telling the truth, and they are telling the truth from their perspective, but they're still talking about bombs in the buildings. I mean, they're not out there as a collection agency per se, but they're still repeating back things because they
get distracted. Yep,
they haven't looked deeply enough.
Beliefs.
Yeah, they have. You can tell that somebody hasn't looked into the evidence if they haven't looked into how the towers disappeared, and anything else besides that seems to be peripheral to that reality, because once you understand the evidence, then you can work out from there. But while you're talking about planes and drones and speeds and conspiracy theories or any of that stuff, it takes away from the really core research that needs to be done in order to solve the problem. And again, what problem are we trying to solve?
To look at.
What is the problem we're trying to solve about 9/11? Because that's your question. What problem are you trying to solve?
Well, with the problem that I was trying to solve was what happened to buildings, because that's where you start. And then if you, a lot of people say, well, we want to know who did it so we can go get them and hang them and whatever they're going to do. Well, in order to know who did it, you first have to know what it was that they did. People say thermite did it. Or bombs did it. Well, what was it that they did? You have to first determine what it was before you can even begin to say, what did it? It's, what was it that happened? And so that's step one. And once you clearly understand what happened, it kind of solves itself. Then you pretty much have a good idea of how. it happened, how whatever it was happened. The buildings mostly turned to dust in midair. So if once establishing that, well, bombs don't do that, airplanes don't do that, gravity collapses don't do that. Big blowing torch doesn't do that. Hammers don't do that. Wrecking balls don't do that. So you can start eliminating kinetic energy. You can eliminate thermal energy, and various other things. So that's you don't need to immediately jump to an answer. You know what it is that you know that you know. And so what we know, the buildings mostly turn to dust in midair, and therefore technology must exist that can do what was done because it got done. So something happened to them that made them turn to dust in midair. They were instructed to come apart somehow. And they were instructed without heat, without kinetic energy.
This is another way to stay in a place where we can actually build community too, and we can get along with each other. Because if we, I'll say to people, can we agree that ... Because we're having, we're going down a road where we're going to have an argument, and I don't see it as being very productive. And you want to reel things back to a place where we can agree on something. So if we can't even agree on what happened and how these buildings met their demise.
Are the buildings still there? Is the building still there? No, they're gone. Okay, something made them go away. We're all on the same page that far.
Yes.
But how much did they go away? How much material went away?
Okay, that's what I'm trying to say, exactly that we have to reel it back, because you can imagine, if you're talking to a kid, for instance, and you're trying to explain to them how to put their mitts on or something, it's complicated because you got to have each finger in a hole, and all they're doing is saying, well, what happens after that when I put my coat on? Well, let's just focus on putting your mitts on right now. It becomes boring, I'm sure. We live in this very McDonaldized culture where we get bored really quickly and we're going to move on to something else. But if we don't understand that, we're not going to be able to put our gloves on properly.
That reminds me of somebody with an agenda who wants to argue with you. They do this, I call it machine gun fire. Well, what about this? And then you answer why that is a certain way, and well, then this, then that, then this over here, until they find something that works. And they're not interested in determining what happened. They're interested in arguing a list a list of talking points. And you can't argue a list of talking points honestly unless you know what happened.
So this is interesting because I don't want to move into this too much, or maybe we could, I don't really mind, but it's not exactly what we were going to be talking about today. I have a question about the Van Allen radiation belts when it comes to the moon landing. Now, a lot of people will start with, I don't think that we went to the moon, or that man went to the moon. Yeah. I don't believe. And the thing that I do is try and do an honest investigation with things that kind of boggle my mind. When I heard about the Van Allen radiation belts, I thought, okay, if somebody could come along and actually explain to me how that works, how we got through. I'm actually waiting to get the answer. I'm not there to argue with somebody. I'm actually asking the questions, and I'm still open to it. And if we have that attitude, we're actually educating somebody else.
My approach of the moon landing business is, I don't know if somebody was there or not. But if they were there, if humans were there, it didn't get there the way they told us. They had to use a different way, because there's problems with the story, with what they gave us. See, I won't say that nobody was on the moon, because you don't know what you don't know. But I'm saying there's problems with the story we were given for whatever reason. And here's some problems I have, X, Y, and Z.
Yes, yeah. And again, if we can,
and if somebody else can answer the question, the problems and solve them, that's another thing. But I fail to see how.
This is the difference between an honest investigation and arguing with people or trying to get our way, which we were talking about earlier, is that we can pose things in a way that is an investigative kind of question, and that is how I see the moon landings, because for many years I've realized that so many different things can't can't have happened that way. But I don't understand all of them. I don't.
Yeah, I
But
don't
I
get so hung
can't.
up with the radiation belt. That I let somebody else worry about that. Who knows what their technique was, but of course, that we've talked about before. My biggest
But
problem
I
is,
want to know. I
yeah,
want to
here
know what their
they're on
technique
this
was.
they're on this
That,
foreign planet, and
but
they're on this foreign planet, the moon. I'm calling it a planet. I'm looking at from my 12-year-old perspective, where I first came up with this. That okay, and they have to hit the gas pedal to take off. How do they know exactly how much to take off with, and without jet rockets like they have on the Earth? And isn't it true they don't have an atmosphere there? So what is it pushing against? So anyway, so how they spring load and launch this thing up to rendezvous with the mothership that's in orbit around this other planet, the moon, at precisely the right place and time, precisely.
amazing.
And then they travel back to the Earth, and they don't know within 500 miles where that thing's going to pop through the clouds. That's the problem I had. And I never will forget on the TV set you see these guys stand on the end of the aircraft carrier with their binoculars, looking and looking. Is it going to come here, there, and they have search planes back and forth, and they don't know exactly when it's going to come back. Well, that means they don't have very good computer system if they don't know exactly when it's going to pop through the clouds, or where they don't know how to track it. But so then how do they know precisely where to land on the moon? That's a problem I have, and somebody needs to solve that. Like, I'm thinking that if the thing is in orbit around the moon, it's probably going pretty fast. So how do you match that speed and dock? It's just
It's miraculous. It's amazing that they were able to do that, especially with the technology they had then.
Right. And the space shuttle, docks with the space station. And so that thing is flying around the Earth at whatever speed, to 17,000 miles an hour or something like that. So that they're both going the same speed, so relative to each other, they're not moving.
So they say. I've been looking into the space station, and there's some.
Yeah, and they just kind of ease up to it, but it's that's a known planet. They've known about what they need to do for a long time. But here's the moon. They supposedly had never been to that place before, and they know just how fast to accelerate, to keep the mothership circling around and to rendezvous with the mothership. I just couldn't understand why they can precisely connect up there, but don't know within 500 miles on their own planet.
Well, we'll never know because they've gotten rid of all of the the tapes.
Oh, they lost all the.
They've
lost all that
all the
technology.
paperwork.
They can't do it again.
Yeah, and it's a struggle. They didn't document it. All those 400,000 people, they forgot to document it, and so we'll never know. It's really sad about that. All that money gone up in smoke, but at least we know we went.
This new project, is it Orion project, something like that? They're going to supposedly going to try to go to Mars, and they haven't solved the radiation belt issue yet.
No,
and they're hoping people just don't ask them about it from the other.
Well, this is exactly the thing. I show that to people because it comes right from NASA. So it is an honest question because they are asking where how are we going to fix this? How are we going to make it so we can go through these radiation belts? And I'm questioning it too. And then I just extend it back to how did we go? Why don't you just use the same technology you already used? But apparently they lost that.
That was the thing that I found so hilarious is China was sending up, and this is what made me think that the U.S., all the various countries have a plan. It's like it's your turn to be the leader. It's your turn to be the leader here, and they hand the baton back. That I think this is the handing over of that baton. Who gets to be the world leader? Is China was sending their unmanned, whatever you call it, up to the moon, and they're going to use the same technology the U.S. used. For the little go-kart to go around and film things.
Which got there miraculously.
I felt like that was in your face. It's unmanned, but an unmanned mission. But they're going to use the same technology that the U.S. used for the dune buggy. And I think, okay, what are they telling us? the same kind of amazing battery power that could, batteries could be out in the hot sun and do that kind of thermal cycling and not lose power and.
Well, we've talked about the Hasselblad because I used to use Hasselblads, and that I find fascinating. And I thought, why can't they come up with that kind of film on Earth? Because I still have to, put it in a Faraday bag when I go through the the airport. You still have to take care of your film, but apparently that was special film, and I was perfectly willing to believe that it was. I just haven't seen it being marketed.
Right.
And it's even
you
now.
don't know what you don't know. You don't know what you don't know, and but you do have questions about, like, why has it been X number of years and you still don't see that. That there was one thing that did come from this quote space technology was I think it was Tang, that the Kool-Aid kind of drink,
Right.
orange flavored sugar water.
Well, that's
And they claimed that
right
was
there.
space
That was
age.
worth the billions that we've paid so far.
Right.
I'm just seeing if I can find something here.
It is fun. It's fun to tease these things, but it's important to find out. Like I say, I don't focus on the radiation belt thing or some other things, but there's certain things that I have problems with enough that I stop there. Okay, we're done, kind of thing. Just like the flight Malaysian Airlines 370. Okay, they're playing this Where's Waldo scavenger hunt every day. The news was saying maybe it's over here, oh, maybe it's down here. I'm thinking, well, okay, was there such a flight? Did the plane, and there was a plane, did it actually take off? And if so, which direction was it headed in? If you can't answer any of those questions, I'm done. Everything else is speculation from there on.
Well, again, that's what I like about the way that you go into an investigation. It's really helpful when those of us
To know
that are
when
sort
to
of
stop.
yeah, you know when to stop, and you can actually just focus on one thing and be content with that. And that's why we have the gift of the book that you wrote. Where Did the Towers Go is a wonderful example of what can happen if people would just take the time. In the old days when people were writing by candlelight, often they would take one problem and work on it their entire lives because it wasn't answered yet. So they had to just really focus in.
Somebody else would work on another problem. Yeah.
Or work on, continue on after that person had died. It's like building those cathedraals. Those were generational things. They weren't just kind of going off and doing.
That's a good thing to mention, because just let's look at those logically. If humans built those, that was a big investment of time and energy and resources and all. So those people weren't out hunting for food. Somebody else had to hunt for their food to feed them while they were doing that. So it shows that people had somewhat leisure time. Mm-hmm. It wasn't everybody, had to go gather food, hand to mouth. It showed that somebody else, could gather food for 2 or 3 people, and that would allow the 1 or 2 people to be building those things.
Correct.
Because that's a big investment of time, where the people were away from food hunting, and so it also shows, coordination and collaboration of the society.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Rather than trying to tear everybody else's work down.
Well, I think we live in a world that is so fast-paced, and all the information and all the back and forth opinions, we just never take the time really to almost meditate on one topic. Just take one thing and really think about it. Between now and next week, if we just took one aspect of something that we were questioning and gave it some time and focused on that, and people will say, well, I have all these other things I have to do, and that's really what the crew is trying to do. Yeah. They're trying to get us.
If you can only focus a tidbit here, and there, And so you're scattered all over the place and can't know anything in depth. And then you have to trust what somebody else is telling you. You're completely owned.
That's the key here.
Yep. And so the route to independence is to know what it is that you know, and you keep steady on it, and not be coerced by a pile. You can disagree with somebody, but that means at least one of you is incorrect. And if somebody wants to change, they can say, "Well, okay, let's see why you think that way." And I think of caveman days, and like the total eclipse of the sun. Um,
Hmm.
they may have been, in a panic when the lights went out, and all sorts of theories onto what happened, why the lights went out, and why they came back on. But other things, I think that people were much more honest in that era because their lives depended on it.
Hmm.
If somebody was dishonest, they weren't going to trust that person because their life depended on it. And if we went back to that type of mindset, if your life depended on everything being correct and honest, of course now you wouldn't get anywhere because all the dishonesty. But I think that's the way back
Well,
to a
I
civilized
always think that
society.
community is the way back. I always believe that that is the only way back because that tests our integrity, our honesty, our ability to trust one another. It puts us in a position where we have to. And I think part of what the crew's doing is to make it so we don't trust one another, and we're skeptical, but in a way that isn't critical thinking skeptical. It's just I don't trust you. I don't trust the other person. But we need to move back to where we trust other people and are put in positions where we have to. Where we're interdependent, not independent, but interdependent.
Right, right. Like somebody be an expert in one area, somebody else be an expert in another area, rather than everyone drinking from the same spigot.
Mm-hmm. Right. Well, and sometimes we might drink from the same spigot if we have to. We have so many options. That was something that I noticed when I was quite young, when I was a poet. Very pretentious person that I was, but I was writing a lot of poetry, and one of the things that I really noticed was that we have so many options, so many choices that we didn't have when my parents were growing up. Even my dad had to go to war. He had to go to two wars. There was a depression. They had electricity when they were quite I guess when they were fairly young, but the generation before them didn't have electricity at all. They didn't have washing machines. They didn't have so many things. So they were really thankful every time a piece of technology came along to make their basic life easier. They didn't have to spend all day washing clothes.
I had this discussion with a fellow professor who was thinking this is it's advancement of our culture, all these new advances. I said, who says that's good? He says, well, like electricity, isn't that good? And I said, well, people don't get as good as sleep anymore.
Mm-hmm.
How do we know that it's good to have all these advances? Because you're not necessarily, what is your objective in life? Is it to learn about the world around you, or is it to see how much stuff you can get, or is it to, it really causes you to stop and think about that. Think about like Little House on the Prairie type days where these had candles at night. You better hurry up and get to work in the morning because you have to get your field planted because you can't argue your plants up if you haven't planted them yet. They have to be planted. You can't argue them up. And so you're going to have to plant, and you need to finish by sunset because you got to go. The light's gone. You don't have a big flashlight out there. So it forced integrity, I think.
Well, yeah, I think that it becomes
If you were going to
intrinsic.
succeed. Yeah, if you're going to
Yes.
succeed. Like
Yes.
I say, and I found even now, people who are farmers or who grew up in a farm tend to be more honest.
Devin
And you think about
Nunes.
that. Well,
That's
you think about that is to you can't argue the plants up. You have to have planted them and gone through and done the work. Because otherwise, how's it happen?
and not only that, if they don't come up, you're not going to eat. So it has a very definite correlation. It's not like you can just walk away and go, that didn't work. Yeah, it's a.
Or you can't blame it on somebody and then come out and get your free coffee. At Starbucks. It's just,
Did they have Starbucks then? Yeah. Well, all of these things put together into a cultural stew makes for some pretty crazy stuff. And I think that's what we're experiencing right now, the crazy stuff.
it's like the thing we started out with. This group is calling another group racist, and the other one's calling that one a racist, and that one's calling. What is the productivity that comes out of that? Nothing. They're just chasing their tails.
Mm-hmm. I have a video that, if we get in trouble for playing it, that's okay. But I think it's really appropriate to play if you don't mind. It's actually about 4 minutes, though. I can share with you. I can share my screen. It's Steve Jobs just before he died. The last words that he spoke, and we could play it now or play it later. But I do want to play it sometime. But I want you to see it because I think it's really important and it's really relevant to what we're talking about here. But go ahead if you have something else on that topic that we were just on. I don't want to go too far off, but I thought our audience might be interested in this. It's very telling because Steve Jobs was successful, from a worldly point of view. He was very, very successful, and he died at a very young age. He was only 56, and very sad actually because I think he had a lot to contribute, but I think this is the greatest thing that he did was to leave this behind. These words. Not sure that it's not said.
Is that about the crazy ones? Here's to the crazy ones, the misfits, the square pegs and the round holes.
No, not at all. This is just.
I love that quote because it's
here's to the crazy ones.
What's wrong with being different?
Is that a Steve Jobs?
Yeah, that's it. That's his quote.
Let me see if I can find it. You're going to hear
Here's
me
to
typing.
the crazy ones.
Let me get this here. Where's the producer?
Yeah.
Mr. Producer, where are ya? Sorry, you guys out there, if you hear me typing.
Well, we can even see you typing. That's even better.
Whoops. Can you see?
Yeah.
Oops.
Here's to the crazy ones.
I've got my keyboard up high, so I'm trying to feel for the keys. Okay.
You have Steve Jobs in there?
Here we go.
The first one, the Misfits. Yeah, okay.
Okay, I'm going to put
Can
this
you
up
read
on
it?
the screen for people so that they can see what I'm doing with my DuckDuckGo. All right.
Oh,
And,
that's too tiny of a print.
I was going to say, here's to the people that can't read screens.
There's the crazy ones, the misfits, the rebels, the troublemakers, the round pegs in the square holes, the ones who see things differently. They're not fond of rules. You can quote them, disagree with them, glorify them, or read their magnifying glass.
Glorify or vilify them. But the only thing you can't do is ignore them because they change things. They push the human race forward. And while some may see them as the crazy ones, we see genius. Because the ones who are crazy enough to think that they can change the world are the ones who do. Nice.
Yes, I love that.
Well, I'm going to just play this
Okay.
thing because I thought it was quite lovely. It's 4 minutes and 23 seconds. I'm hoping that you can hear as well as see this. But let's check it out. Can you hear that?
I can't.
I reached the pinnacle of success in the business world. In others' eyes, my life was an epitome of success.
Yep.
However, aside from work, I have little joy. In the end, Wealth is only a fact of life that I'm accustomed to. At this moment, lying on the sickbed and recalling my whole life, I realize that all the recognition and wealth I took so much pride in have paled and become meaningless in the face of impending death.
Sorry about the spelling.
In darkness, I look at the green lights from the life-supporting machines. I hear the humming mechanical sounds. I can feel the breath of God of Death drawing closer. Now I know, when we have accumulated sufficient wealth to last our lifetime, we should pursue other matters that are unrelated to wealth. It should be something that's more important. Perhaps relationships. Perhaps art. Perhaps a dream from younger days. Non-stop pursuing of wealth will only turn a person into a twisted being, just like me. God gave us the senses to let us feel the love in everyone's heart, not the illusions brought out by wealth. The wealth that I have won in my life, I cannot bring with me. What I can bring is only the memories precipitated by love. That's the true riches which will follow you, accompany you, giving you strength and light to go on. Love can travel 1,000 miles. Life has no limit. Go where you want to go. Reach the height you want to reach. It's all in your heart and in your hands. What's the most expensive bed in the world? A sick bed. You can employ someone to drive the car for you, make money for you, but you can't have someone bear the sickness for you. Material things lost can be found, but there is one thing that can never be found when it's lost. Life. When a person goes into the operating room, he will realize that there is one book that he is yet to finish reading. The book of healthy life. Whichever stage in life you're at right now, with time, we will face the day when the curtain comes down. Treasure love for your family, love for your spouse, love for your friends. Treat yourself well, and cherish others.
I thought that was amazing, actually, when I saw
Yeah.
it.
Yeah. What are particular things that you thought of when seeing it?
Well, one of the things that I really think about is when people are sick, and I'll speak for myself, when I have been in that situation where, it's a life and death kind of situation where you're really ill and you don't know if you're going to get better or get worse. You do think about the things that are important, but I think you also do another thing. You go with one idea at a time. Sometimes it's just like, can I move my leg? And you become very focused on this one movement or this one thing or this one thought. And it's a different experience that way because, we're not able to do what we were doing before. So that was something that I really noticed, and it helps to stay focused when we're looking at life generally, the things that we're trying to figure out. We have to really stay focused.
Yeah, yeah. I was. You're thinking you were learning something from what he was telling you. What I was getting from it more was, here's somebody who's on their deathbed who's thinking of others.
Yes.
And that's it wasn't about him. It was about what he was telling other people, and that was pretty special.
And so different from what I had thought he was, because, you hear all these stories about him and how he would steal ideas and he was really tough to work with. And I didn't have a lot of respect for him until I saw this. And suddenly I just thought, we're all the same. We're exactly the same. We have the same hopes and dreams, but it's because we all have this finite point in our life that we sometimes have to focus on our humanity, that we're mortal beings, and and some of us think we're never going to have this experience of dying, and that's, I don't want to get morose about it, but it helps us to think about what's important in our life when we consider that. Imagine if we didn't ever have to think about that, how selfish we'd be.
And you never know when that's going to happen. You kind of hope it's going to be sometime in the distant future, but you don't know if it'll be tomorrow. What I think of is like something we hadn't talked about this week is that airline that blew an engine. Apparently the fan blade got loose, and for some reason the ring that usually holds the turbine blades from tearing things up came off, and it tore up that window and killed the woman who's sitting there. I like window seats too, so I can see out. It makes you wonder about sitting there window seats. But it's just like she was at the wrong place, the wrong time.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's not something she would expect. Just instantly gone, boom. You got hit by the shrapnel.
That was
from the
such
engine.
a sad story. Yeah.
But she didn't have to suffer, I don't think, for at least for long. But it's and it also is very admirable how well the pilot dealt with it. I've learned later that the pilot it was a fighter pilot, which they're trained to if this then that, if this then that, so they don't have to sit and diagnose a problem. They just immediately react.
Yeah, she did a great job, I heard.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
And it was perfectly calm. And then, of course, after she shuts off the engine, walks off, you kind of think, what did I do? But you can hold together. So she was a good fighter pilot.
Yeah.
To deal with the situation. Yeah, come down one engine. Planes can fly with one engine. I don't think they can take off with one, but
I'm always amazed
it's
at pilots
not like a
anyway.
glider.
The idea that people
it's a little bit too heavy for a glider, so I don't think they can do it without an engine. But
and they don't have to go through radiation to do it. That's I believe in planes. I've been on a plane.
The one that I'm most admiring is a puddle hopper that went from island to island in Hawaii. So it had lots of cycling of takeoffs and landings, because you go from one island to the next. And it had some fatigue cracks in the fuselage, and then on one of the flights, the fuselage top came off. Gone. You look in, you see the people. You can look it up on I think it was Aloha Airlines. There's a picture on Wikipedia of it. When the thing lands, you see the floor of the passenger cabin, and people are sitting in their seats there. I think they lost somebody that got blown out, but people had their seatbelts on, remained in their seats. Now imagine coming in to land on that, because you don't have the stiffness. You have to land that super carefully, so everything has to go down at the same time, because you can't have any bending in the fuselage. Because you don't have the top for stiffening.
It's the idea that these guys can just remain calm and
well,
go,
yeah,
now we do this, now we do this, now we do this.
That's part of the requirements. It's not like being a bus driver. It's part of the requirements of being a good pilot. And if you can't do that, they probably stress test him
I
in
think those
trainers.
bus drivers have to have a stress test as well. They
Well,
just
but they can't lose it quite the same way as
no.
you can't pull off the side of the road and lose it.
Or yeah, walk off the bus. I think anybody
Yeah.
that is doing a job like that is remarkable. But yeah, just the idea of taking this thing off the ground and having 200 people on board that you're responsible for,
Yeah.
and then something goes wrong, and yeah,
You have to just tune them out and just pay attention to dealing with the plane and hope everybody else is doing their job.
well, now we
'Cause
get
you
back
can't-
to
you
that
can't- you can't worry about-
exact thing.
Yep.
We are, Jojo says that's training, and that's what we're doing here. We're training our minds to be disciplined and to actually understand something completely before we go on to the next thing. So what if we were just to take something, people took your book and they took a page and just said, I really want to understand
Focus
this
on it.
completely.
Yeah. Yep. And that's if they focus, they're not looking for just some talking points, but they want understanding just page by page from front to back, and then maybe a second or third time straight through. They'll know what happened. But there's something else I was thinking of. Did you ever see the movie Space Camp? That's one of
I
my
don't
favorite
think so.
movies.
I don't think I did.
It's sort of a fantasy movie. It's some kids going to space camp, and they were apparently doing an engine test on one of the space shuttles, and drew straws, and this one team got to sit on it while they're doing the engine test, and then the thing ends up getting launched into space. So it's kind of interesting. But before then, the kids, at space camp, they're learning how to do different tasks, and they have this trainer thing where these two people are sitting in the pilot seat, and then somebody else, the technician guy, is supposed to be hooking up something, and is it the red wire, is it the blue wire, is it the green wire, whatever, and they start arguing about it, and the one pilot gets up to go argue with him, and then the camp counselor comes in. What are you doing? I can't hear you because you're all dead. And
Right.
because you didn't work together, and well, so and so, shut up, I don't care, because this person was busy trying to micromanage everybody else's job, and she needed to be back at her pilot seat. And then it turns out when this thing accidentally got launched, they all knew their roles and knew how to focus.
Mm-hmm.
It's a really cute movie. It's a really nice one. So and there's different things. It wasn't space ready, so it didn't have enough oxygen on board. But they had this space station that was being built that had some canisters on it, and so they go to rendezvous to that one to get the oxygen things. And then here's the guy trying to figure out which valve to open, to make sure he doesn't blow up the thing. But it's really, it's a neat movie that I think adults and kids can watch. I think it came out in 1990, plus or minus a year. Let's see, Kate Capshaw, I think she was the camp counselor gal. Tom Skerritt was her husband. He stayed on the ground. And Kelly Preston was the bimbo who was a genius.
Ah, yes. In typical style. Typical Kelly style. This is something that I teach through filmmaking, and I think it's really a great thing to have whatever it is, whether it's sports or whatever your preference is, space. That's where character driven came from, because it's all about experience based, hands-on, responsibility based workshops where kids interact with one another. And basically, if they don't work together, then the thing doesn't come together. The movie, and there's a whole bunch to that, but it's adventure.
If you haven't seen this movie, you need to see it. It's brilliant in terms of that, of figuring out how to work together. And then this guy who his dad was going to give him a Jeep if he went to space camp. So he didn't want space camp, but he wanted the Jeep. So he went to space camp and just was goofing around, and he wasn't paying attention to what he was supposed to be doing, but it turns out he was ended up being a very good leader of the group, because the gal who was supposed to be flying the thing. I can't do it. I can't do it. He goes, okay. We'll all die. Okay, if you do it, we might not die, but if you don't do it, we for sure will die. And she's still panicking. I can't do it. I can't do it. And then calls the Kelly Preston character. Hey Tish, you ever read a book? Because she talks about what a dragon is. She remembers everything she's read. You ever read a book on how to fly this thing? And then so the girl then grabs the book back. Okay, I'll do it. Competitive, aren't we? He knew how to manipulate the people to do their jobs, and to keep everybody calm. And it was, he ends up being a good leader by the end. But at first he was irresponsible. But it's just funny how.
Well, that goes to the idea that people have, these things are in us to do, like the idea of manipulation. When you use that word, it often seems like a negative thing, but we are influencers. I think that we're born to be that way. We're born to be influencers. Like, say a dad and a mom. You sort of go, well, I'm doing this just like my dad or just like my mom, and it can be a positive or a negative thing. It's meant to be positive. It's meant to be something where you're going, hey, I learned some really great things from my parents.
Right.
But it's turned into
that's why that movie is so good. You can see it in all of them. They learn responsibility, and they learn to do their tasks, and at the end, the pilot girl admits that she's not a good commander. She's a good pilot, and the other guy was a better, But he knew how to get people to do their jobs correctly, and it was cool. And they had a kid on board. Okay, this is a funny scene, and I like the hints he drops. But the kid has to go to the bathroom, and he's explaining, here's a suction gizmo, and you sit in here and you use it, and then
what?
That's funny. And then you hear the kid finally figure it out, and he closes the door, and then you hear this,
Oh, I can just imagine. And that sounds like a pre-9/11 movie, because now it would be, we wouldn't want kids to go and even simulate things that are dangerous. It's too scary to put kids in that situation. And I used to do workshops and various things before 9/11. All of a sudden the insurance went up by some astronomical sum. They're saying, it's 9/11. And I'm saying, okay, so 9/11 means that when I'm doing childcare,
jack up the price of everything.
Now workshops for kids are going to be, 3 times the price because of the insurance. It's crazy what happened after 9/11. So no more space camp, no more fun. Somebody, you're going to get sued. Some parents can be disgruntled.
How many people out there have seen Space Camp?
Anybody seen Space Camp? Anybody out there? Somebody was wanting to call in and talk, and I haven't organized that yet, but one of these days. And, I think we need probably one more hand on deck. And what I should do is give somebody a wrench so they can do they can chat to people online there, and maybe I can take care of some other things. But just so you know, it can be a little bit tricky to do a live stream, to host, and to try to do the call-in as well. So not right now, but I do have some ideas for being able to be in the room. We're going to have sort of a room where people can be invited to the meeting, and they'll have the option of being able to interact. And I want to see what the interest is in that. And if you go over to characterdriven.com, that's all I ask, is that you have a registration over there. You're part of the community, so that we know who you are, so that we don't have trolls. We don't have those people. I'm just trying to keep things safe.
It's also, it tends to put in more accountability.
Well, that's it. That's the safety factor to me, is that if people are willing to go over and participate as part of the community there and register, then that's a way of at least going through a little bit of a hoop. But somebody says that they'll do the monitoring, and I'm happy to give you a wrench. I'll give you a wrench. We'll see how that goes. I'm going to put Zero Infinity, you can be a monitor. And anyway, thank you very much. I appreciate it. We don't get too many trolls, but I do need somebody in there to sort of take a look in case there's crazy stuff that happens. And so I'm monitoring the chat while I'm talking to Dr. Judy, and I'm trying to change the image on the screen. And you can tell that I go away from the mic sometimes, but I'm trying to keep things cohesive here. So, Zero, thanks so much. I appreciate you taking the responsibility. Somebody's getting the message here. And I think all of you are. And I appreciate all of you. Thank you so much for coming out each week and being so interested. And Dr. Judy is amazing to share of her time and all of her thoughts on the news as it comes up. There's lots of different things that lots of topics, that's for sure. We sort of touched on the space thing. I'd love to have a whole show where we talk about space and all the incongruities, all the things that we don't have now that we used to have, like batteries that could hold their power for 36 hours. And,
or also in the hot sun.
Yeah. Oh, and the Hasselblads, that's the one that really gets me. If only I had those kind of cameras where I could take them out in the 250 degree temperatures. Somebody was talking about the vacuum as well. I was looking into the vacuum situation, and that was the vacuums go by torrs. Did you know that?
There's different kinds of, I think it's 760 for atmosphere or something torr, but there's different types of, there's mercury. There's different types of measurements that or PSI. It's.
This guy was speaking specifically about torr because this is something that he does as a scientist, and he was kind of laughing about things because he was kind of giving an example of, you put your vacuum on your arm and you see what that does, just to give you a baseline.
Oh yeah, vacuum cleaner, right? But,
yeah. And then he talked about, what would happen if you're in space and kind of gave all the equations and that sort of thing. So he was specifically talking about the space station and how many things make him laugh about that. It's a good one. I'll share it with you sometime. Because it's just science, it's just math.
Yeah, there's some questions I have about that. I won't say what is or isn't.
No, but we can have questions.
But there is some interesting things like the frizzy hairdos on the space station. They look starched.
Uh-huh.
I just have wondered about what causes it. But maybe they put hairspray in and make it starched, so that you don't have little flyaway hairs. Long hair gets in your eyes easily. Yeah,
but do you do it so that your hair sticks straight up in the air when you're standing?
Maybe
vertical.
Maybe that's how it ends up going. Who knows? But if you just had limp hair and it was long, it would be in your eyes easily, and then sticking into things and getting wrapped around the axle of something and. Be harder to control.
We have to think about all the possibilities, and this is the discipline, because I want to go not possible, but it's all part of the.
They could starch it, because if they didn't, the consequences would be horrendous. Having hair that's maybe it's going to short a circuit. I don't know. Could be sticking around and floating into everything. Cat hairs get around in the house if you have shedding cats.
When they were putting things together for the moon mission and for the, I guess for the space station, everything had to be under very clean circumstances. You had to have, your hairnet and that sort of thing. And then, they're sort of looking at how the astronauts themselves are handling things, and they're going, well, where are the hairnets, and how can they? And also, this guy said that they would need to have a whole workshop.
That's why I wonder
on board.
Well, that's why I wonder if they have, some goo that they put in their hair to make it stiff, so it doesn't fly around.
I think they put the goo in the hair, but I think it's not because they're flying around.
Yeah, but anyway, right? But you would think they would want that anyway. If the situation is true, there's there's other issues, but
Well, I think
don't think it's
I'll prepare
too
some clips that we can do off of YouTube, because as Zero
Right.
says, I could end up getting, dinged. I could end up not being able to be on the
you
air at
don't
all.
need
So
to.
we don't want that to happen. But I will
No,
prepare
don't
them.
don't play any, but I think we've all seen some that or people can go look at them someplace. But having worked on parts of so my master's degree was working on like the cargo bay doors of the shuttle. Yeah, I was invested in it. It's and it is not impossible to have something in orbit. That we know there are satellites in orbit, right? So why not have a tin can in orbit?
Oh, I was completely convinced until I saw this. I saw it this morning. So I'm just not even going to say anything because I don't know
No.
anything more
Well,
than
there are
what
people.
Tor is.
There are people that like to also play with the idea that the Earth is flat. There's that people get sucked into. But from what I know, I have no reason to doubt it.
Well,
But
what I
they're
liked
doing
about
is
this guy,
another strange thing.
sorry.
Yeah, go ahead.
What I liked about this guy is that he works in this specific area, and I guess he was really interested in the space shuttle. And then he said, okay, there's some things that they're doing where they would have died, and there's some things that they're doing having put it together himself. He said it doesn't work that way, and one of them is the cargo hold and that sort of thing. So without going into it too much, he was not skeptical at all.
They have airlocks and so
No,
forth.
no,
And
he's
they have
talking
the
about-
cargo in the
Yeah.
cargo bay. They don't live in there.
No.
That's for carrying stuff. It's the taxi ride to
Far
and
be it
from
from
the.
me to engage with you. You've got far
Yeah.
more knowledge than I do,
Yeah,
and I need to look at
just-
it more.
Yeah, it's basically some tin cans stuck together in space, but it's what they're doing there is another question.
Oh,
Yeah.
yeah. And
Yeah.
I'd be curious what you thought about this guy's ideas about the the math and the science behind how things. Anyway, if anybody knows anything about space shuttle, I don't even know his name.
I'm used to doing stuff in a vacuum or pretty low pressure myself, and it's not a big deal. It's just there's different kinds of setups for like bell jars and stuff. They do it on this planet, but docking stuff, and then you have a seal that people go through, or people have suits on and other stuff. But there's this what do you call it, obsession that people get into about wanting to say everything's false.
Yeah, no, he wasn't doing that.
Government
wasn't doing
schools say
that.
that 2
I
plus
don't
2
listen
is
to
4,
people
so
like
therefore
that. That's no fun.
Yeah, but government schools say 2 plus 2 is 4, so therefore that proves that's all wrong.
Yeah.
It's that mentality that's pretty wicked. But the fact that people start questioning everything shows that there is a problem with honesty out there from somebody's part. Honesty, and a lot of folks like the flat earthers. Why was that? Clearly it was a psyop of some sort. But why did people get so invested into it?
Well,
It was really like a good IQ test.
I'm not going to even go there, because I look at some of the things and I go, I don't know that people have ever been far enough out to really take a look at the Earth.
But you can.
So,
You can. No. Here's your own study. Have you ever been on an airplane ride across the ocean, across the Atlantic? Why?
No,
why
I haven't.
After very little time, you can't see the shore anymore.
Mhm.
And you can barely see the shore on the other side. The plane's already descending before you can start seeing stuff. On the ground over there. It's
Hey, you know what?
Why can't you see Mount Everest and what do you call it, Mount Whitney at the same time, or whatever other Mount Rainier? You should be able to see all the mountains at the same time. It doesn't work that way.
Since you mention it, if I was somebody that was into clickbait, I would write, Dr. Judy Wood talks about being a flat earther. Not her being a flat earther. See, that's how they get really tricky
Yeah.
about their titles, about
Yes,
people being flat earthers.
well, it's amazing that people get sucked into this game playing. It's stuff that they can figure out themselves. But instead, they like to argue about some video they saw somewhere. That was a psyop in itself to try to convince somebody of something. But if there are things that you ought to be able to figure out for yourself. Now, I don't know how they explain the total eclipse of the sun. You know, they probably say it's a movie that's playing in the sky. But what I found interesting was that the bugs and birds knew it was coming.
Mm-hmm.
You know, knew it was. Well, they knew it was. They assumed it was dusk, and they, you know, like all the bugs come out at dusk, and then it's totally black, and the bugs are dormant again. I thought that was interesting.
Yeah, they certainly know what's up. Those guys are in touch with nature.
Yeah,
Well, I think
so
that's the closest we
cows
have to how life used to be for people in communities is looking at how the animals live in community, and you're certainly able to do that with your chickens. So
yeah, but the cows kind of freaked out. They ran to the woods mooing. It was funny. They freaked out. They didn't know why it was suddenly getting dark. It shouldn't get dark that fast. I wasn't around my chickens. I was a few miles away from here. I wish I could have seen what the chickens were doing.
I wanted to tell people because we missed last week, and I think we missed the week before too.
Yeah, so they're 3 weeks old now.
Yeah, so I've got those chickens somewhere. Sorry guys, I'm doing this thing where I go away from the microphone, but you carry on. Tell them about your chickens.
No, it's all right. The Puff, and I guess they didn't know the name of the other one because it was born 12 hours later. Yes, Puff, and then Nugget is the yellow one.
I don't know why
they're out with the big mama.
I was sure
Puff started out black, and then now is getting white polka dots on her. But it turns out Nugget's a him. I think it has a comb. It's getting a little pink on it. But it's not a bully.
Don't think this is it. Where's the producer? Don't know where.
Character-driven media and its owners and
That's not it at all. That's so not a chicken. Sorry, guys.
That's all right. That's all right. We can organize something for next week.
We can. But I did take
It's a good time to go, maybe.
I think it is a good time to go. And yeah, now that we've gone, I'm sorry, I'm just sitting down again and looking at what's on the screen. If I seem like I'm distracted, that's because I am. Okay, well, thank you very much, you guys. People are thanking you, Dr. Judy, for being here. And, somebody wants to know...
thank them for being here, too.
Back to Peter wants to know how Nugget's doing because they actually named Nugget.
Right. Yeah, Nugget's doing well. He's not aggressive. But it is a boy because it's got pink on its comb already. But it's polite, and the black one is Puff. It's about twice the size. It's just real big. It's got big, huge feet like Bigfoot. But Nugget is very caring of Puff. Nugget would be able to run with the group. And if Puff got left behind, Nugget will hang back and stay behind and make sure Puff doesn't get left.
Nugget's your favorite.
I thought that's pretty good. No, Puff is.
Oh, right. Okay.
Yeah.
Nugget's your second favorite?
Yeah, Nugget's fine. And they sometimes come and I call them. I think they hear my voice and they know that I'm interested in having them come. You tap them and they come over.
Okay, guys, I'm going to have more video. Video to come. Video at 11. I will get that all together and we will have it all lined up. We did a very impromptu show today because that's how we do things sometimes. We just go, hey, let's do a show.
Yeah, last week I got my my garden plant. It was going to be it was like 80 degrees and sunny, and it was going to rain all day Sunday. So I wanted to make sure I got my garden finished. So just as the sun set, I got the last things in, and sure enough, we had this horrendous rain. But then Monday night, we had this global warming issue. No, climate change because it got cold.
Yeah, I know.
Gotta keep track of it.
Yeah,
But actually, this winter is dragged on longer than is like winters used to be. 40 years ago.
That's global warming.
I think the
for you.
pendulum is. I think the pendulum's swinging back.
Well, 97% of us agree that it is swinging back, so that means that it is. As soon as you say that.
Okay, that proves it. Yeah, that proves it.
Yeah, 97% of the people in this room that I'm in.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yep. So that proves it, right? That's it. We're joking about the 97% of scientists, whatever. Yeah, of the ones that they asked.
Yeah. Oh, and you don't really need to identify them, and you don't need to say how many there were. There could be two scientists.
You don't even need to identify what question you asked them.
No. You just say 97%, and it's magic. Everybody believes. It's like when you put a graph up, and people say, "Well, I've got a graph, so it must be true."
Next week, here's another homework thing. Come with your what you find is one of the silliest things about the climate change propaganda.
That'll get you going.
For me, the polar bears on the ice cubes in the water. I think that's one of the silliest images. Because polar bears have to eat, and the fish are in the water. They're not up on a ice, up on a glacier. So of course the polar bears are going to be fishing, from an ice cube in the water.
Well, folks, bring all your friends. Tell them to come and
See what's your favorite humorous thing like that?
Come and debunk the debunkers. We'll have a free for all.
What people who don't think about it immediately think is representative of global warming, like the polar bears on ice cubes. But then when you stop and look at it, wait a minute, the polar bear's got to eat. Where's the food? It's the fish in the water. So of course they're down at the water's edge and floating on something, before they dive in and go fishing. So things like that that people's first knee-jerk response to works for the psyops, but then you stop and think about it, and you realize how silly it is. So things
some
like
people
that.
Stop and think about it. Some people just press share, and they don't think about it at all. They just say, "Oh, this is good. I'll just share this with my friends," even though I don't know what it says. Anyway, we're going to wrap up because we promised, and it's actually coming up to 2 hours, which is about right for the show, I think. Sometimes we get crazy and we go on for another hour. And so can I get people to go over to characterdriven.com and make yourselves an ID? I've revamped the whole thing, so there's not that many members there. It doesn't really matter. It's just us friendly people. But it's a way for me to communicate with all of you. And if you do want to be part of the show, I'm putting that together so that you can come into the room. But you do have to be part of that community. I have to know who you are before we can give you that information, because we're not going to do a call-in show right now. That's too crazy for me. Okay, so thank you very much, Dr. Judy Wood, and I encourage all of you to go get a copy of her book if you haven't already. You can also do a click through at the website, go to Amazon, or else you could go to wheredidthetowersgo.com. You can go there and get it directly. I've got a link in the description. So, and we have some cool stuff. We've got mugs and T-shirts, and it's really just about wearing these things or using them in a way to get people asking questions. I love, I'm not really...
Yeah, to think.
I'm not big on advertising. But I love the idea of, somebody asking a question. Yeah, sorry, I walked over you. Getting them to think you said. Right?
Yeah. Know what it is that you know that you know. Yeah, you found that in a T-shirt. What people look and go, huh?
I like the one that says, "What problem are you trying to solve?"
Yeah, right. That's another good
useful.
one.
You can just point to it every time people want to have an argument with you.
Yep.
Okay. All right. So,
yep. All right. We're done.
No, don't want to cut you off, but I'm just trying to say goodbye and then I keep coming up with new things to say. So thank you all for being here today, and we look forward to seeing you again next week. And have a great time. Have a great week. And be nice to each other. I'm sure you will. We have the nicest audience here, don't we? Okay. Talk to you soon.